Good morning here in California, for those of you who are here in California. I'm Deborah Lustig. I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues, and I want to welcome you to today's event, where we are presenting two very special prizes, the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize and the Foundations for Change Thomas I. Yamashita Prize. We are very honored to be the institutional home for these two prizes. And on behalf, let me get started again. On behalf of ISSI Director Martine Sanchez-Jankowski and all of us at the Institute, I want to thank David Kirp and the Yamashita family for endowing these two prizes and choosing to encourage and reward social change. And you'll see a number of people here on the screen with me. We're going to get started and hear from them soon. For the moment, let me tell you a little bit about these prizes and thank some other people. I want to thank the selection committees for the two prizes. It's always inspiring and exciting to read about the work being done, as well as challenging to pick the honorees. Our selection committee members put a lot of thought and care into this process. And the Yamashita Prize uses a nomination process. So I want to thank the nominators for that prize for bringing such great work to our attention. The format for today's event is listed in the YouTube video description, but I'd like to give you a quick overview now. We're going to start with the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize and then move on to the Foundations for Change Thomas I. Yamashita Prize. Next, we'll have our keynote address by Dr. Rupa Marya, and we're going to end with Q&A. So if you have a question, please put it in the YouTube chat, and we'll be collecting those questions and asking them on your behalf. And now it is my pleasure to introduce David Kirp, who is now a professor of the graduate school here at Cal, which means that he's retired from teaching. Before that, he was a faculty member at the Goldman School of Public Policy here at Berkeley. He's a policy consultant and a contributing writer to the New York Times, as well as an academic. In his 17 books and scores of articles, he has tackled some of America's biggest problems, including affordable housing, access to health, gender discrimination, and AIDS. Throughout his career, his main focus has been on education and children's policy, from cradle to college and career. And because of his deep commitment to children and youth and his belief in the power of Cal undergrads to do great things, he decided to endow this prize. So welcome, David Kirp.
There we go. So I've got to correct Deborah on one score. I may be quote unquote retired, but I'm still teaching. And last spring taught a course called Ethics in the Age of Trump, which turned out to be an even more exciting course than I could have imagined. And I will do it again next spring, and I'm fishing around for a title for the course that doesn't assume that it'll be Ethics in the Age of Trump in 2021. So we'll figure out what I have to say. As Deborah said, I've spent most of my career working on issues having to do with kids and generally, and kids in schools in particular. And I've worked on everything from consulting with the Obama administration to writing to teaching. I've been through the years really impressed by what it is that the best of Berkeley undergraduates can do. Amazing folks. And so I thought, I really want to figure out how to shine a light on the great work that's being done in hopes of inspiring others to carry on that kind of work. The prize winners have been uniformly superb and none more impressive than Yvette Lau. And I want to say, I think more than a few words about Yvette before I invite her to say something. You read through her material and it's kind of astounding. She's combined a passionate commitment to kids' welfare with an appreciation of the value of rigorous research. She's done remarkable things at Berkeley and continues to do so. As a member of the Hygiene Heroes team, at Berkeley. She's spearheading the introduction of hand washing curriculum to education centers for street children in Manila in the Philippines. And hopefully she'll be able to get back to that work, as we all want to get back to our work when COVID is receded into history. Her goal, she writes, is to defend children from suffering from preventable diseases by providing access to and education on good hygiene practices, sanitation, and safe drinking water. For over 2 years, the Hygiene Heroes team, of which she's a member, worked to improve hand washing behaviors among students in rural India. An effort has been remarkably successful. More than 40% of the 9,100 students began washing their hands with soap before lunch, compared to 0 before the curriculum was introduced. She's also designed curricula for primary and middle schools on the topics of tobacco, alcohol, and drugs, with lesson plans for the teachers. And those experiences inspired her to extend the reach of her Hygiene Heroes to her home country, the Philippines. She's piloting the hand washing curriculum with a major NGO, and she basically on her own, reading the description of her work, sort of managed to forge those connections. That NGO, Child Help Philippines, reaches more than 250,000 street children in the Philippines. Like a good policy practitioner, the impact of the trial will be assessed through a randomized controlled trial, the research gold standard. So I said, Yvette represents the best of Berkeley, as one of the letters of recommendation put it. She has a passionate, driven, critical-minded personality. Only one thing that I would urge her to do. She plans on being a doctor, which is great. I hope that she also studies public policy or public health, because someday she would make a great Surgeon General. Yvette?
Actually, let's hear from David Levine first.
You reordered the
yeah,
program.
Sorry.
Okay, David, the floor is yours. Professor of Business Administration, who has turned his attention and his skills in behavioral economics to helping kids in developing countries around the world, and is the person with whom Yvette has worked for several years.
Yeah, just David Kirp outlined a lot of what I wanted to say. I run Hygiene Heroes, which is designing school health programs on hand washing, safe water, now on COVID, for schools and kids in poor countries. It's been great working with Yvette. As David said, she developed some of her own topics that we were starting to pilot test before COVID arrived. And then he said more or less on her own, she developed these relations with the Philippines, and that's incorrect, completely on her own. She said, I want to do this. She found the partners with the NGOs, the research partners. She raised the resources. So this is in some sense a project under Hygiene Heroes, but completely driven by Yvette. And it has been nothing but a pleasure working with her. She's officially the student, but I am definitely her student as well. And I would love to see her as Surgeon General.
2 votes for Yvette.
Oh, okay, I'll go ahead and speak then. Thank you so much, Professor Kirp, for awarding this prize to me and for the introduction. And thank you, Professor Levine, for the kind words and support. I'm extremely honored and humbled to have received this prize and to join the long list of past recipients who have committed to improving the future of children. I think that now, more than ever, people all over the world are recognizing the importance of hand washing and other preventative health measures in protecting not only individuals, but also each other and populations as a whole. Hygiene routines like hand washing are a norm in places like the United States, which has helped to prevent the spread of infections. However, in developing countries, people are still at a higher risk for infectious diseases like diarrhea or respiratory tract infections. And these are completely unnecessary and avoidable risks that result from factors such as poverty, poor education, and poor infrastructure. These diseases are especially life-threatening for children in low-income communities. So when I joined Professor Levine's research group, Hygiene Heroes, I wanted to contribute to addressing health in the developing world. I worked for close to 3 years now with other students and under the guidance of Professor Levine to develop hygiene curriculums for children and women in rural India and expanding to some parts of Africa now, and obviously now in the Philippines too. Our curriculums are all available for free to the public through the Hygiene Heroes website for anyone interested. And I was especially interested in this research program because as you mentioned before, I grew up in the Philippines and have witnessed for myself the lack of hand washing facilities available to the public, as well as the environmental conditions that make it difficult for people to prevent illness. For instance, how can you stay clean when there are no soap or paper towels provided in shopping centers or hospitals where you would expect to have access to these basic hygiene resources? And would you still prioritize purchasing soap when you can barely afford a meal? I believe that it was important to improve both health education and access to health resources for those who could not afford hospital treatment and medication for potential illnesses down the line. I'm so pleased that I was able to expand the reach of our hand washing curriculum to the Philippines by partnering with the NGO Child Hope Philippines, as well as college students in the Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines. The goal of the hand washing curriculum is to instill routine hand washing habits in children by giving them the knowledge and understanding of how, why, and when to wash their hands. We have collected data on hand washing knowledge of the children, translated and wrote activities and stories suited specifically to the cultural context of the Philippines, and brainstormed methods to cut costs for items needed for hand washing. I also communicate directly with the NGO leaders and teachers to continuously see how the curriculum could be improved. Aside from the educational aspect of the curriculum, as you know, a lack of resources is a major hindrance in people's ability to wash their hands. Thus, Professor Levine devised a cost-effective health intervention that we use where students can create their own soapy bottles. And these are basically recycled plastic or shampoo bottles that contain water mixed with soap powder that students can use to wash their hands. And they end up costing less than $1 per student per year, which is more sustainable than buying a bar of soap. This experience has been incredibly rewarding, as I was able to volunteer on service trips to see existing hand washing interventions, and I was able to meet and work with passionate students, health professionals, and NGO leaders, both in the Philippines and the US, to help bring this curriculum to life. More importantly, I was able to make an impact in improving the lives of children in my home country. The hand washing curriculum was planned to be piloted to 50 to 60 children between the ages of 5 to 14 years old who live on the streets of Metro Manila, and it has the potential to reach 1,000 to 1,200 street children annually over 6 cities in the Philippines. However, in light of the pandemic, since children are not allowed to go to school, I have asked that Child Hope Philippines in the meantime disseminate any parts of our curriculum that they may find helpful, along with their distribution of relief goods, which has been their primary focus as of this moment. So if anyone watching this is looking for resources to encourage and teach children to wash their hands, feel free to contact me and I'd be happy to assist you in any way. To reiterate, our goal is to defend children from suffering from preventable diseases by providing access to and education on good hygiene practices. Once again, it is a huge honor to be receiving this prize. Thank you very much to both Professor Kirp and Professor Levine. And I also want to thank my parents, Ivan and Tessie Yao, who have always been very supportive of my endeavors. Also, a big thank you to the Hygiene Heroes team and other student volunteers at UC Berkeley and college students from Ateneo University who helped make this possible. I hope that the world continues to prioritize public health and health education for children. Congratulations to all other prize winners today, and thank you very much.
Okay, David Kirp, you're up again.
Well, honorary mention goes to Jonatan Calvillo, who unfortunately cannot be with us today, but a few words about Jonatan. He describes himself as a first-gen college student with a passion for making education a driver for social mobility. And it's clear that he sees himself as a driver for social mobility. He's been a mentor for college-bound students, as well as for those with broader range of career goals, because he realized that it's not just college students who need support, it's people who are looking for good careers after leaving high school. He worked last summer for Assemblywoman Christy Smith, where he drafted legislation that would enable students enrolled in apprenticeships to qualify for some form of Cal Grant student aid. So again, the focus is on apprenticeships. He talks about, as his career plans, all lined up. When I talk to undergraduates, they often don't know what life is going to be like 5 and 10 years down the road. He does. He's going to work his way up the organizational ladder in the Los Angeles School District. And he says his ultimate ambition is to become a member of the Los Angeles Unified School District School Board, which is a very powerful position indeed. And he has the drive to do it. So congratulations to Jonatan.
Thank you. Thank you, David, very much. So now we're going to move on to the Foundations for Change Prize. The Foundations for Change Thomas I. Yamashita Prize is awarded annually to an outstanding emerging social change activist in California. The award honors a person whose work transforms the existing social landscape, often in subtle and previously unappreciated ways, and serves as a bridge between the academy and the community. Honorees help to build the capacity of community-based organizations and social movements to confront pressing issues by applying their academic expertise. Simultaneously, they enrich academic scholarship by sharing the insights and knowledge produced from community engagement with a broader academic community. The award was established by the family of Thomas Isao Yamashita, who was an undergraduate student in civil engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, and a member of the class of 1942. The internment of Americans of Japanese descent on the West Coast of the United States in 1942 made it impossible for Thomas Yamashita to graduate from Cal, and he eventually received his engineering degree from the University of Nebraska, although he remained very attached to Cal throughout his life. Because he worked as an engineer on building foundations that are invisible but essential, the award honors those who build the foundations for social change. And this prize is all social change scholars in California are eligible for the prize. This year it just happens that both our prize winner and our honorable mention have connections to Cal, but that's not a requirement. So it just shows you how outstanding their work is. And this year the prize is awarded to Bernadette Lim for her work on health justice. Bernadette goes by Bernie, and she is a third-year medical student in the UC San Francisco School of Medicine, and she recently completed her master's through the Joint Medical Program, which is a dual degree program between UCSF and the UC Berkeley School of Public Health. She's going to tell you a little bit about her work, but I just want to mention among her accomplishments, she is the founder of the Freedom School for Intersectional Medicine and Health Justice, an interdisciplinary learning community that has involved 300 plus students, faculty, and community members in the Bay Area and across the United States. She created and co-hosts a podcast called Woke Walk Docs, Woke Women of Color, to amplify the lives of women of color in medicine and health justice. And this is a very successful podcast. In a little bit over a year since its inception, it's had over 15,000 plays and over 600 subscribers. And I'm sure that's probably even more today. She also founded the Freedom Community Clinic, which has served 300 plus underserved people of color in the East Bay through its holistic healing clinics and nonprofit community wellness programs. On her academic accomplishments, she graduated from Harvard in 2016, cum laude, and she was a Fulbright Nehru Scholar to India. So this is all while she's still a student, and looking forward to seeing what else she accomplishes as she goes on with her career. And now let's hear from Bernie herself.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And hey, y'all. Hey, Mom. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning and wherever you are in the world. Hella appreciate it. And greetings from San Francisco. Definitely want to thank ISSI for this beautiful prize, the Yamashita family, and really all of the communities that have taught me in the Bay Area what it means to be a bridge between academics and the community. And I really feel like this prize about bridging the academy and the community has been really just central to my life journey and what I like to call my self-love story in progress. And so just want to thank you, because I think this image of a bridge really comes to mind as I think about my work. And also it is actually the foundation of so much of the work that Deborah was talking about. I want to really thank the women of color, third world feminists, and Black liberation theorists and scholars and activists who have really shaped how I see my work. And I wanted to just read this quote that is foundational to the Freedom School and to the Freedom Clinic. And it says, "A theory in the flesh means one where the physical realities of our lives, our skin color, the land or concrete we grew up on, our sexual longings, all fuse to create a politic born out of necessity." And I'll just repeat that one more time. A theory in the flesh means one where our physical realities of our lives fuse to create a politic born out of necessity. And when I first read this in the ethnic studies class in undergrad, I was really thinking a lot about, how this applies to my life. And I really saw it in medical school, where I came into medical school and I realized that I came in with the intention to be a healer for my communities back home who do not have trust in institutions of medicine because of the history of violence that I think is hidden from a lot of people who believe in the public narrative of medicine being an institution of health. But really, if we really dig deeper into the history, many immigrant and communities of color don't hold trust with medical and public health institutions because of this history and the lack of acknowledgement that it hasn't done to rectify those wrongdoings. And I realized that oftentimes in medical school, we all kind of know the pre-med route where it's very intense, where it's very competitive. And oftentimes the science that we learn, for many of us who intend to become healers or the first in our families to become doctors, we get lost because we don't see health equity at the center of our education. And so I wanted to bring this idea of theory in the flesh and politics born out of necessity as what was the motivation for the Freedom School. Because as I came into medical school, I realized that I had to deconstruct the education taught to me. I had to deconstruct the ways that education taught me that Black and brown bodies were seen as inherently inferior to other communities, that we were pathologized, and that really at the center of a lot of medical education is the study of disease. And I had to deconstruct and say, is this the reality of my communities? And I realized, I said no. I remember, my mom and my families and my communities who use so many different tools of ancestral indigenous healing, of community, of laughter, of resilience, of different methods that aren't acknowledged as healing by the medical institutions. And many of these are subversive, they're community, and they're local. And I realized that this is the knowledge that I was brought up with, and this is the knowledge that I must bring to the future of medicine. And so I can really talk about each of these initiatives in great detail, but wanted to really acknowledge again the fact that I had to deconstruct, and many students of color, first-gen students, have to deconstruct medical education. And with the Freedom School, we aim to reconstruct and build on the Freedom School legacy of the Freedom School, the Freedom Summer Projects in 1964 during the Civil Rights Movement. And similar to those, we basically gather bi-weekly as a community to engage in our own curriculum that integrates critical theory with community health site visits and also the occasional turn up, because community is so important to us, to really challenge, you know, these outdated theories and modes of learning found in medicine and public health. And it's been awesome because it's not just medicine and public health that's represented, but also people in English and in environmental science and like community. And you're like, how are all these people coming together? But it's really this idea that health is beyond the hospital and health is in our communities, and that we all play a critical role in shaping that. And just wanted to mention that because, you know, we aren't able to bring this to every single place in the US, we decided to create a podcast called Woke Docs, which has been super fun. That's where I met Dr. Rupa Marya. And that's where we've had so much fun really having these conversations on the public platform. And then lastly, I just wanted to remark on the Freedom Community Clinic, which began last year and has been so fun, so critical, because our organizing team right now is me as a med student. We also have just an amazing team of women of color healers, an acupuncturist, a health educator, an energy cleansing Reiki healer, as well as a yoga meditation teacher. And we all realize that through Freedom Community Clinic that we must integrate the strengths of ancestral, indigenous, and holistic healing with the strengths of Western medicine to bring this care directly to spaces and places where our communities gather, to really lower the barrier for communities to not simply, you know, have to go to a sanitized or an unfamiliar hospital building, but to actually come to their street, to their community center, to their youth center. And it's so fun. I just want to shout out this one story in Deep East Oakland, in the hood of Deep East Oakland, where folks don't have access to a lot of healthcare. And there's so much stigma against a lot of holistic healing because it's seen as a thing only for white folks. But we had our team of women of color healers come through. It was their street festival. And we had an acupuncture circle, as well as energy cleansing and blood pressure checks. And because we were in a place where people already gathered and celebrated, a lot of the people, when they were like, who are you guys? I've never had my blood pressure checked in my life, but I guess I can just try it right now. And then a lot of people then started, you know, started inquiring more about acupuncture. One person started, and then they were like, hey, yo, friend, you gotta come, you gotta try this. I feel so relaxed. And then they would do energy cleansing, and then they would just keep telling their friends that they had to join the circle because they've never felt so calm in their life. And they've never had a practitioner who looks like them actually offer these services. And my favorite image from that event was there was Too Short blasting, you know, East Oakland rap, just like blasting throughout the street festival. And people had acupuncture needles, and they were just feeling so in community. And they were feeling so healed because they were being introduced to these methods that they had never done before. They were getting their blood pressure checked after fear of going to the doctor. And by being on their street, by being in their hood, we were able to really bring that care directly to them. And so that's really at the core of the Freedom Community Clinic, but also inspired by the Freedom School and Woke Docs. And now we recently launched something called the Institute for Healing and Justice in Medicine, which aims to further the research and the community engagement scholarship that really binds the Freedom School, the podcast, and the clinic, knowing that all of it is interconnected for a future in medicine. And so just want to emphasize again that the real theory is in our flesh. Even if we can't see it in our education, the real theory is our flesh. It is our lived experiences. It is our bones. It is our love and our emotions and our traumas and our ability to rise above it all that allows us to really push these institutions and become bridges where our life experiences are not only valid, but necessary, especially to communities who need it most. So thank you again so much for this opportunity and for the opportunity to be with such amazing folks during this morning.
Thank you, Bernie. That was wonderful. Great to hear about your work in your own words. Now I'd like to move on to Will Smith, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us This morning, Will received honorable mention for the Yamashita Prize. And Will is a Black and Korean farmer and food activist in occupied Ohlone tribal territory, which we now call the East Bay. As an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, Will's studies focused on agroecology and indigenous foodways. He graduated in December 2018 with a degree in conservation resource studies in the College of Natural Resources. Within a predominantly white college, Will, with the help of others, fought for students of color to have safe spaces, specifically green spaces, where students can steward the land and reconnect with ancestral practices surrounding food and medicine. This included implementing guerrilla gardens in vacant campus spaces, protecting those spaces, and engaging with other students to form a relationship with the land they are on. Will is currently a farm educator at the UC Gill Tract Community Farm, and he's a co-founder of the Black Earth Farms Collective, which grows and distributes thousands of pounds of food on a sliding scale. And we have a link to that in the chat if you want to check that out. Now we're just about ready for our keynote, and every year we like to have a keynote speaker because we want to draw more attention to the work of our honorees, and having someone who has already a little bit further along established themselves is a great way to do that. And I thought, when I was looking at our honorees and the themes that cross their work, I thought about Rupa Marya and her work, and I didn't know that she already knew and is connected with both Bernie Lim and Will Smith. So that was just a wonderful serendipitous moment. And so rather than, I thought it would be more personal to ask Bernie to introduce Rupa. So Bernie, please come back on stage, so to speak, and take it away.
Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, and thank you so much for this opportunity, because y'all, if you know Rupa, honestly, one word is Rupa's goals. Okay, Rupa is real and she is truth to power. And so I first met Rupa. Rupa probably doesn't know this, but I actually went to one of her gatherings with Black Panther leader Elaine Brown in one of the Do No Harm Coalition gatherings, and it was so powerful. And I'm still connected with so many people. And it was about reimagining healthcare. And then I had the opportunity to interview Rupa on one of our podcast episodes. You also check it out on SoundCloud, Woke Docs. And it honestly one of our most popular episodes, because Rupa so eloquently talked about how police violence is a public health issue. And the way that the energy of Rupa is just such a beautiful, authentic energy. And I just want to say that before I kind of go over the list of professional accomplishments, because I think that's what makes her such a beautiful bridge between the academy and the community, is this realness, this authenticity, this ability to really be true to the stories and the voices of the people, and see herself as a vessel through which people can really see themselves as uplifted and worthy of being represented and acknowledged by these institutions. And now I'll go through kind of the traditional professional accomplishments that are of so many. And so I just wanted to name that Rupa right now is an associate professor of medicine at UCSF. She's also the faculty director of the Do No Harm Coalition, which is a super dope coalition. They've done amazing campaigns. Y'all should really check them out. It's with over 450 health workers committed to structural change to address health problems. And what has also been so beautiful is that Rupa has really, at the center of her practice, honored Indigenous people, and has continued to be committed to the decolonization of medicine in order to come back to the roots of health and well-being. And so at the invitation of the Ohlone Native community, she served in medical response at the Standing Rock Prayer Camp, as Indigenous people were encountering increasing police violence while protecting the right to drink clean water. And she was also invited by the Lakota health leaders and elders to help set up a permanent community clinic for the practice of decolonized medicine at Standing Rock. And all of this is Rupa's day job, but also Rupa does amazing farm work. And Rupa's an amazing, amazing musician. So y'all should check out her band, Rupa and the April Fishes, because they do dope stuff. And so I'm just so grateful to introduce and to be present here with a dear friend and a dear scholar activist, Dr. Rupa Marya.
Thank you so much. Bernie, I love you. And thank you for inviting me. And Yvette, congratulations. Will Smith, you're not here. Congratulations. Yeah, I just resonate so much with what you've said. I just first want to acknowledge that we're all here on the territory of Huichin, Ohlone land, unceded Ohlone land. And I just want to give thanks to the ancestors of this land and my ancestors for providing me the opportunity to grow and thrive in this beautiful area in my work and my service. I prepared a little talk, so I'm going to try to do a screen share now. Is that good? Here we go. Let me know. Where do we go? Here we go. All right, is that working for everybody? Good. Okay, so I am so honored to be invited to share thoughts with you today as we celebrate the work of these young scholars at the beginnings of your important careers. The ability to bridge worlds has never been more important, and to carry the messages between communities that might not otherwise intersect, and to carry those messages with integrity and accountability. We are living in such important times. And this is a time where we cannot leave for the next generation the work that is at hand right now. We have the capacity, intelligence, and grit to take on the hard work of structural change that our ancestors pushed before us. 3 months from now, and six months from now, 1 year from now, we will be living in a very different world. The economic collapse that we are facing will bring new challenges and also new opportunities. And we must start imagining now what new coalitions and partnerships can be created to bring about the changes that can set us up for better outcomes for our whole society. COVID is showing the world that many of us have known in our work. The suffering of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor people is built into the architecture of our societies established through colonialism. When Bernie mentioned the historic wounds of medicine towards people of color, she's not exaggerating. So the institutions of medicine were developed in a time of colonialism. Our universities were set up as Europe was carving up the world for domination. And so the very practices that we have codified in medicine and in public health, we were created at a time of intense inequality. And that inequality was never a project to right that inequality in a time of colonization. And I say this because as we talk about health equity, it's important to realize that was never a project of the structures in which we practice. And therefore, if we want health equity, we might have to really get in there and change these structures. These systems ensure health inequity through land hoarding, wealth hoarding, environmental poisoning, and the current reality of health as a privilege instead of a right. And these systems are over 600 years old. They won't change overnight, but the more we accurately diagnose the problems we are encountering, the better chance we will have at deeply healing the whole. And we're seeing this exposed really in our faces right now with COVID. COVID is showing to the world what we know. It is disproportionately killing Black, Brown, and Indigenous people here in the United States. The way the virus kills is through runaway inflammation in our bodies. And it seems to be getting a head start with those of us whose bodies are already chronically inflamed through historical trauma, chronic stress of experiencing daily discrimination, nutritional depletion through poor food access, environmental stress of being exposed to chronic environmental pollution. We see the diseases of inflammation here, asthma, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, already have this same racist distribution. These conditions predispose the body to worse outcomes with COVID-19. When you combine that with the financial concerns, we see who cannot afford to shelter in place. Therefore, who is more at risk of contracting COVID. To diagnose the problems we are facing, we must stretch our minds to think as vastly as we can. Knowing that COVID kills through dysregulated inflammation in a cytokine storm, we must start to address those things that are making our bodies inflamed. From the trauma our communities face, to the food we eat, to the air that we breathe. COVID is the first test to the system of how we respond to global climactic events, and we see how many holes we still have to fill. This map on top is a map of the global distribution of nitrogen dioxide, a byproduct of fossil fuel combustion and manufacturing. The map below is a distribution of COVID-19. Studies are now showing that viral particles travel on particulate matter. And we are still learning if these viral particles that travel on particulate matter are infectious. But if so, air pollution is definitely potentiating the spread of the disease. We also now know that people chronically exposed to elevated level of particulate matter 2.5 are more likely to have worse outcomes when they get COVID. Locally, we see the same distribution here in Oakland. So I live in area 58, and in area 56, so area 58, that dark area, it has the most COVID cases in Oakland. We have a nursing home at which there was an outbreak. And in area 56 is both the airport as well as the ABNI foundry. So we see here this is the mapping from the EPA environmental justice map. We see the same sort of breakdown with regards to an overlay of environmental toxicity, as well as socioeconomic disparity. So the ABNI foundry is one of the Bay Area's biggest air pollution sources, in addition to the refineries. And the ABNI foundry has a Title V green light to pollute the air here in Oakland. When the virus first started, I alerted the mayor to my concern that people who would be exposed to this level of toxicity in the air might be more predisposed to suffering from COVID, and that's exactly what we are seeing. So while we excoriate the federal responses for not being based in science, but by being based in, being motivated by industry and a will to power, we must remember that those who are upholding the current power structure have many faces, and they are beholden to the power structures that they uphold. So much so that in the midst of a pandemic with a shelter-in-place order, those who cannot shelter in place, or those who cannot wash their hands or use a restroom safely, are offered this. This is San Francisco's solution. Instead of this. This is the Argonaut Hotel, which currently has a coronavirus special of $87 a night. There are currently 6,500 unhoused people in San Francisco and 30,000 vacant hotel rooms in San Francisco. On April 14th, the Board of Supervisors unanimously passed emergency legislation to lease 8,250 rooms to house the unhoused. Today, about 1,000 unhoused people have those rooms. There are right now 1,000 rooms that have been sitting empty and are currently being paid for by the city of San Francisco. The SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19 is present in the air we breathe. If we talk loudly, more viral particles are put into the air, and they can remain there for as long as 8 minutes and travel farther than 6 feet. The virus is shed in our feces at rates much greater than MERS and SARS, suggesting that the viral replication is happening within the GI tract. From our unhoused youth, we are learning that when they are in the streets, they are defecating in paper bags and throwing that into the public garbage can. This places all people at risk, not just of spreading COVID, but other fecal-borne diseases. The current safe sleeping villages do not have private restrooms. Hotel rooms do. During this pandemic, physicians like myself have been forced to discharge unhoused people to the streets after they leave the hospital, knowing that they cannot really shelter in place in a tent. Ian Carrier was discharged at the end of April from UCSF and died the following day on a street corner. He was never offered a hotel room in spite of being chronically ill. The city of San Francisco has accepted 2 public health standards, one for the housed and a separate for the poor. When I have asked people at the DPH what the issue is, they list concerns about not getting reimbursed from the federal government for these hotel rooms, The city has the capacity to commandeer them at a reasonable rate if needed, and they refuse to. People in the DPH cite needing services for unhoused people to go into a hotel. While many people do need mental health services and wraparound services, a great majority of unhoused people in San Francisco were recently housed, up to 70%. If I just lost my home, I wouldn't need services. I'd need a safe place for my children and myself. I need to be able to lock a door behind me and to be able to use a private restroom. Many people simply do not have, many people simply just need access to private and dignified shelter. COVID is exposing the weak links in our society where we need to shore up our efforts so that we can uplift as many people as possible so that we all will have enough to get by. This scarcity is opening our imaginations to what might be possible so that the solution to this is this: land reform, rematriation of land to Indigenous people for the purpose of healing wounds of colonialism. Here is Indigenous matriarch Ohlone Karina Gould getting food from the land. Karina seeks to move food away from a money-oriented system back to a health and nourishment system that is the basis of Indigenous perspectives around food. It also looks like this. So I had the pleasure of meeting Will, and this is Jamil from, Will is from Black Earth Farms. This gentleman is with Raised Roots in Oakland, but Black and Brown Indigenous farmers engaging in their own farming enterprises. We must support their land ownership and security on land to develop farming enterprises, to uplift a community economically while establishing greater food security locally. I was able to meet them at the EcoFarm conference this year, and I've been to that conference 4 or 5 times. I'm married to a farmer, and it was the first time I saw so many young people of youth and of color who were there, and it was remarkable to see the energy and excitement actually of everybody from that engagement. Our responses now must be holistic and imaginative. If the structures that exist today prevent swift and appropriate responses, we must create new ones to do that. We must decolonize our approach to wellness, reaching across those divides that separate food from environmental health, from community safety, from an understanding of history and dynamics of power, from well-being. We can no longer silo ourselves as practitioners. Physicians must get in the dirt with farmers and advocate for land reform, soil health, and a system where our food producers cannot fail. And farmers must learn how to advocate for food for all, because they are truly the stewards of our health. They must advocate for protecting the most vulnerable amongst their own ranks, the landless farm workers. Public health workers must get involved with economists to bring understanding of health into our calculus. We must start to understand that medicine is this: standing with Indigenous community against a petroleum pipeline going through their water. That's the Dakota Access Pipeline. I didn't hear a heartbeat. And medicine is also this: accompanying community in their quest to not be shot through racist police violence. When I came out of the hospital in 2016 to accompany my community members who were on hunger strike protesting police killings in San Francisco, I could no longer maintain the division between what happens to my community outside the hospital and how I see health and illness inside the hospital. I had to start getting more involved in directly impacting health upstream. This graph shows the power of organizing. So back in 2006, on the y-axis, we see San Francisco SFPD officer-involved shootings. Most of these people, an overwhelming majority, are people of color, people with mental illness. We see here in 2006, there was an FBI report that showed there was an infiltration of white supremacist groups across the nation and local police departments. In 2011, Chief Sir was hired. In 2012, a racist text scandal emerged in the SFPD. None of the officers were reprimanded or fired or removed from their duties. Throughout the following few years, we had an elevated number of Black and Brown, predominantly Black and Brown people, most of them unarmed, shot by SFPD. In 2016, there was a hunger strike, and that action led to the resignation of Chief Sir. As you can see, since then, the number of officer-involved shootings has decreased. We're nowhere near finished in our work, but this shows the impact of our collective power. What has inspired me most during this challenging time of COVID has been watching the power of our collective action. This graph shows the price of oil tanking because of the confluence of many factors, including a huge drop in demand. This really showed me how collective action can dramatically change the outcomes of our world. If we stop using the things that we know are hurting us, if we can radically change the rhythm of our days collectively, if we can focus together on building where we really need to build, we can have great impact. But this will not come without some conflict, some discomfort, and a great deal of challenge. We need all voices right now singing in this chorus from every sector of society. I had the great pleasure this past week of meeting Troy Duster, the grandson of Ida B. Wells. We celebrated her Pulitzer Prize and spoke about the work of various groups and people fighting for liberation. He talked about how everyone has a role. There are people whose role it is to crack open our consciousness through radical action and speech. And there are people whose role it is to bridge those radical acts with the daily acts. There are people whose role it is to engage in the diplomacy to bring the society along. We each have a role to play, and we must each respect and uplift each other's roles as we engage in this tremendous work ahead, each voice singing their part, and our summation together creates a great symphony of change. Congratulations on your work and your awards. Your work is inspiring to me on many levels, and I look forward to supporting your growth along each of your respective paths and to collaborating together. The way ahead leaves a lot of unknown, and it is really time to engage our imaginations deeply to create new structures that can expose the entrenched ones to be nonsensical as we are seeking for health, equity, justice, and beauty. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you.
Thank you, Rupa. And then if you could stop the screen share. Thank you very much for those inspiring words about the possibilities of collective action and the role we can each play. And I'm not sure if that's just another serendipitous moment that you mentioned Troy Duster, but he actually founded our institute in its previous incarnation, the Institute for the Study of Social Change. So I'm glad he got to be part of the conversation too. So now we have a little time for Q&A. And this can go in all directions. So if anyone have any questions for anyone in the Zoom room. And most of you are muted, so be sure to unmute if you want to.
Thank you so much.
I'll start with a comment that came from Monica Hahn, who actually nominated Bernie. And she said, I'm honored to be considered a mentor to Bernie Lim, as I've learned and grown so much from knowing and working with her. Her unwavering commitment to promoting social justice and community activism in medicine, academia makes her stand out as an exceptional, up-and-coming, transformational leader in health. Bernie, I wish you biggest congratulations for this wonderful honor, and I cannot wait to see what you will do in your future career.
Thank you so much. Everyone should check out Monica Hahn's work. Oh my gosh, especially during the COVID-19 crisis. The work that Monica Hahn has been doing at San Francisco General, especially to advocate for folks who have HIV, being able to give blood donations, as well as the amazing advocacy to eliminate race-based medicine in several equations used for diagnosis and treatment. at San Francisco General has really brought equity in amazing, subtle, and powerful ways in the institution that people have not spoken up about. And she has collaborated across disciplines, communities, uplifted people who have been speaking this truth. And so grateful to call Monica a co-conspirator in all of this.
We don't need to do it in a group, but Bernie, I'd like to talk to you about if there's any way the Hygiene Heroes health education can help on COVID outreach in the communities you're working with. I mean, I mostly work in India and now Africa, and now through Yvette at the Philippines, but wash your hands is a good lesson all over the world, obviously.
Makes me wonder about Navajo Nation. They're still having so much trouble with water access. Is there a way that your organization could help there?
I don't work on the supply side, but on the behavior change side. So other than pointing them to some low water solutions others have come up with, that's not, that half of the equation is really crucial and not what my expertise is in.
You do work on water filtration once there is a supply of water, right?
Trying to get people to buy and use water filters, but I don't actually know anything about how water filtration works or plumbing, or these are really important topics and absolutely crucial, and just not what I work on.
Yeah, David, I do know that even in the local communities of Deep East Oakland, specifically with the organization East Oakland Collective, as well as the People's Breakfast Oakland, they are actually in charge of creating and gathering donations specifically for hand washing stations and education for local communities out here in the Bay Area, which is pretty sad because, as Rupa talked about, you know, the government's not really taking charge of that. It's really on independent NGOs and nonprofits to do that, which is another issue in and of itself. But if I don't know if there are any resources or potentials for collaboration, but those two orgs, and for people who are watching, East Oakland Collective, People's Breakfast Oakland, they're on the ground every single day, and they know the people out living in these conditions, and they know kind of what are the barriers to washing hands, what are the realities to that. So those could be two great local solutions as we think about equity in COVID.
Thank you. So I left out one very important person I wanted to thank, which is Maxwell Vander, our administrative manager, who did so much of the work organizing, you know, speaking of foundations for change, did a lot of the work of communicating with people to make this happen and processing the nominations and getting them in a way that they were readable by everyone. And so I want to acknowledge that work. And he has a question. Are there any good ways your average layperson can get involved in helping local communities, both with COVID and with improving community health in general?
I can start. And so if you're in the Bay Area, the Freedom Community Clinic actually created what seems to be one of the most comprehensive guides among many for that are currently updated, the community resources of food, housing, education, resources, financial resources for folks in the Bay Area, especially during this time. The link is tinyurl.com/Bay Area COVID-19 help. And this guide is regularly updated, and it has basically all opportunities for folks to be involved locally, as well as organizations that need help in the Bay. If you're not in the Bay, I recommend doing that for your city like now. Like, all you gotta do is you literally create a Google Doc, and you act as a bridge really of community resources and organizations that are already doing the on the ground work. It's really helpful for folks to have a centralized hub where they can see many resources and act as a bridge to connect people. I think that's a great way of which to start, whether you're at home. And I know that a lot of folks are in need of, supplies, whether that's masks, PPE. So if you have those, I know lots of hospitals are asking for donations, and I know there are a lot of organizations that help out elderly folks during this time who are in need of emotional support. And so there are many organizations on that document, as well as I'm sure locally throughout the globe, throughout the US and around the globe, that are really taking charge in that. So I think amplifying what already is happening and connecting as a bridge could be of extreme help in, utilizing y'all's knowledge with technology, because that's really a great way to be involved and still stay active at this time.
Rupa, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that Bernie's got it down. I think that's great.
What about advocacy, for example, what you were talking about with the situation in San Francisco? And I'm guessing, San Francisco kind of like probably the best case scenario. And if we can't get it together in San Francisco, but what about putting pressure on elected officials?
I think that is crucial, especially right now, is not just right now, absolutely right now, but in, like I'm saying, in the next 6 months, as more people are going to be threatened with homelessness, we're going to see the economic crunch come in the next, 3 to 6 months, where more people will lose their jobs. It will take a while to get the economy back in shape. And so we need to start building resilient structures right now with regards to housing security, with regards to healthcare access. So millions of people off their jobs means in the United States, millions of people have lost their healthcare insurance. So this is a great time to be pushing our elected officials to advance Medicare for all, to advance housing rent cancellation, mortgage cancellation, not just suspending it for several months so that by the end of August, people have to pay, 4 or 5 months of rent, but actual cancellation, debt cancellation. So this moment is a great time to think systemically around what will impact health. It is also a time to think about how we protect our essential workers. So the modeling we're seeing shows here in the Bay Area by August, we're going to see another huge wave. So as social distancing is being relaxed right now, in 2 to 4 weeks, we'll start to see a climb, and then by August we'll be at a real peak. With that in mind, we need to be preparing the sources for PPE for people who are frontline providers now. We need to be agitating for hazard pay. We need to be agitating for people maintaining their jobs and their pay. It's unreal to me that in a time of a pandemic, we are slashing healthcare workers' salaries. We are slashing jobs for nurses. We're furloughing nurses because we're prioritizing the healthcare system as opposed to the healthcare workers. So this is a time for really advocating for systemic change and innovative financial solutions. So with regards to San Francisco and even the East Bay, in terms of housing, the East Bay's done a little bit better job of securing long-term contracts with hotels. San Francisco, it's horrific what we're watching happen right now with these cages. People who are in them are calling them cages, the safe sleeping zones, even while some of them, like one going up in the Haight, is being organized more by community, which is great. And one in Bayview is also being organized by community. A vast majority of the people who are in the Tenderloin really should not be put in cages where they have to share restrooms. They should be in a place where they have a private room and a private restroom, and not just until the end of the shelter in order place, but this virus is with us through the end of 2022. That's how we need to be projecting in terms of protecting public health.
David, do you have any suggestions of what?
I'll just add, if you're interested in giving feedback on testing, translating, have any artistic skills, Hygiene Heroes can always use more help. And just reading materials to your kid and seeing if they enjoyed it and writing us a note about what works and doesn't is really useful. So hygieneheroes.berkeley.edu.
Okay, I think maybe we're going to leave it there on those suggestions for change and how people can get involved. Thank you all so much for joining us today. As we move through and beyond this pandemic, we count on Yvette, Jonatan, Bernie, and Will to lead the way to a more just future. And we're with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.